Thank you.
That's exactly what you said. They do go for public participation, but then when they start speaking, the first thing they're told is, unasema kama nani? You're too young to know these issues. Both women and young people, they are not supposed to speak in such participation. So it is encouraging that young people now are speaking out. As we heard earlier on, the only way is to stop being silent. And if you speak, people will listen. But I want to segue into something very interesting about participation. And I'm going to put the question to Albert. Young people turned out in absolutely large numbers for the Gen Z protest. A lot more than those who ever turned up to vote in the last election. What stuck with me in the last election was a lot of young people who were singing and taking Baba to the polling station in Langata. They all went with him. They were singing with him all the way to the polling station. But when they got there, only he went to vote. They didn't vote. And I started asking myself, these are all supporters of Baba. Do they not realize that it is their vote, not their singing, it is the vote that will put Baba in power? And then I said, well, things have changed now. The big Gen Z protests have come out. We are going to have a larger voter turnout. Yet, from what we are hearing from IBC, I cannot confirm, is that young people are not turning up to register. So my question to Albert is, what do we need to do to let the Kenyan youth understand that the reason we have bad leaders is because we don't vote? And how do we change that perspective so that in 2027 we have the largest youth turnout in Kenya's history?
Okay. Thank you so much for that great question. I think it aligns especially from the institution where I come from. And first of all, I think I would like to ask us that I think we need to appreciate first of all ourselves for coming and choosing to come for this gathering, because whenever we have such gatherings, to me, what rings in my mind is that at the moment, especially now when our democracy is shrinking day by day, then this becomes a awakening process, a awakening conversation, where we begin to have a collective will towards advancement on where we want our Kenya to be like. And when I received this invitation, of course it was for my Secretary General, who is now away in Ethiopia for the works of universities. And I said, I'll come in and sit together with us and have this conversation. Now, coming to the issue of election, of course, I've been a voter twice, right? Yeah, this will be my second voting in 2027. At the moment, there is need for us to start having a very more engaging conversation that brings the Gen Zs and the young people, especially on the table. During my time, the first time when I voted, I remember we were reached out when I was in Moi University. I was president Moi University. And IBC was facing the voter apathy in terms of how can we ask the students to go and register and all that. And I want you to let you know that actually in the room, we have many university comrades who are here. Comrades in the room, comrades power. And I think I need to recognize USLA. They are here almost quarter of the room. Ebu nione kwa mkono comrades wa USLA. Yeah, you can see the numbers. Those are university fellows, all of them who are here from our organization. And we are already working on something, especially as USLA, on how we can have a roadmap that will lead us to have a majority of us as young people to turn up to vote. All we will ask for is the support, and I won't say that I will look at the former conversation that you actually where you drew your question from, where we had former Prime Minister, the late Raila Odinga, going to vote, and he was with all this number of youth. We have seen even in the creativity industry that even there is a relationship where now parents even are now collaborating with the young people, even on TikTok, to dance, by the way, to do those. And I want to, yes, and I want to really appreciate Honorable Martha Karua, who is really doing that. She's embracing the young people, doing those TikToks together. And so even to the question that you asked my colleague on the Did the elderly work well with the young people? I think it is transformative. Right now, it is working towards that direction. And when it comes to what we can be able to do, I think it is high time, because what we've seen in this time where we have even leadership which does not have morale. You know, somebody just wakes up and they announce that, you know, today we are going to have such a kind of fund. And you don't know where that money is going to be drawn from. When you hear about the budgeting issues around allocations on activities around youth and whatever, the money is not there. And even as an association, we have reached out, in fact, to some agencies to try and get support towards these activities and some of these plans for the election period that are coming in 2027. But you will be told there's no money. Then go get money or support from the civic societies. Utaambiwa wewe ndio unapinga serikali. Mumesikia, for those who are founders and leading organizations, I think that's where it starts from. That you are already opposing the government, and then you ask yourself, who is the government? What does the Katiba tell us? The government is us, the people. So the conversation should be carried on by on, and encourage all our young people, especially from where I sit, that we're already rolling out plans for voter registration, even for the comrades, and we have already reached out to the IBC, and we want to start activations in campuses. Some of these conversations that we are having here, cutting across the board of the youth who are in the institutions and those who are outside the institution, I think this conversation should also be carried to the campuses, because now that we have authorization as a legal entity to have and hold functions with students for the first time, by the way, Honorable Martha Karua, getting this registration, it looked like a walk in the park. We started registering in 2020 when I was in first year, and it is in 2025 that we are getting legal, because we were being told by organs that, you know, you are registering something that can turn up into something else. And so this is a journey. We need the support of each other. As I said again, it's a journey for the willing, that we ensure by 2020, na tuanze kuhesabu kura saizi. The way we were counting in 2022, how the votes were being done, let us all know that by the end of this meeting, we know ni wangapi wako na kura. In fact, some of these meetings tukikuja, let us be very ruthless. Unafika hapa unaonyesha wewe uko na kura. Kama hauna kura, you cannot be a part and parcel of civic society or this movement. Can we make that, can we pass that law? As many of the same opinions say aye. As many of the contrary opinions saying nay. The ayes have it. So, yeah, so anytime we have such conversations, I think from now, tukikongamana malpopote, kuja na kura yako, so that we tighten up mbele na nyuma, so that tunajua hii safari tunatembea pamoja, na kumbe we don't have warthogs inside. Hatuna, kuna msemo inasema ndani ya kuku pia kuna mwewe. Yeah, hatutaki madoadoa. Unaingia hapa, you are registering, you have your ID, you have your voters. If you don't have it, show us on the photo. So that as we spend a lot of money in this conversation and time, we don't want to kuchokeshana, you know. Let us journey tukijua we are in a process to deliberately change our nation and have the right leadership in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Albert. And that is something many of us are committed to work together to make sure that it happens by 2027. I want to now ask Mr. Olo two questions. One is, having covered the movements in Kenya for a long time, what is it that we can learn from your perspective, from the media perspective? What is it that we can learn from the past? Or what is it about now that is refreshing in terms of our democratic renewal? And then, going forward, what are the dangers we need to look out for in terms of the violation of freedom of expression? Just as it has happened in Tanzania yesterday, the internet was shut down. We have seen that happening in a lot of African countries during elections. So what are the things we need to look out for to make sure that the pillars of democracy, of which freedom of expression is one, is maintained, and that the young people do not, and all of us actually, do not allow any such move to happen in Kenya as we go to this election?
Yeah, thanks. I want to be fairly honest. I'm normally very brutal in the way I look at things, and I know that we have quite some power here. He has power to stop me. There are people here who, you can even drown my voice, because that will be power. So I'll be a little candid about this. One, I think I want to recognize that young people are coming out. You are being late in coming out. The problem with the young people is that they were disengaged before. I was arrested at 22 under the Moi regime as a student. And during that time, you could not even convene 5 people near Odeon or Latema. You would simply be picked away. And during our student days, we used to mark 2nd of March, JM karaoke. So we were always out there in the streets. And it was much more important conversation than some of the conversations that we are having now. So while we encourage young people and thank them for coming out, that they came out last year is something that we appreciate. But you see now, what have been the interests of the young people before? Why were they dismissing if you were in the street then? Why were they wondering why these people are marching in the street? What was their occupation? What were they engaged with? So begin to ask the question, because the problems in Kenya didn't begin last year. So that is a provocation I must give you, and because now you will lose it, because if you think that the struggle began last year, that is not true. And that is why I'm framing this question. I want to agree, Kawive, the idea about intergenerational dialogue, I think you put it well. The intergenerational dialogue is a question of knowledge transfer, skills and so on, and comparing notes. What are the young people doing better? What did the old people do, all of the older generation? Not necessarily very old. I mean, am I very old? No, I'm not. Yes, in this group. But don't you think there is something they can learn from me? And that is why Martha is here, isn't it? Because if there was no need for intergenerational dialogue, Martha would not even be here. Now, I was a little disappointed. There are things that were said earlier on before break. One, you spoke to the soul of this nation and the need. In fact, this conversation is about, getting back the Kenyan soul. That is true. But it must be done through a very, very honest process. And there was also the discussion around the distortion of our history. We are guilty of distorting history even right here. Because Martha, Honorable Martha, somebody alluded to the fact that with what has happened over the last 1 or 2 weeks, you would have had a different position in this country, right? I had that. How come that with that momentous development that is making a transition, we cannot even observe 1 minute silence in honor of the former prime minister? I mean, how dishonest can we be as a country? I'm challenging you people. Those people who think that it is important to record that history, stand up and you observe 1 minute silence. If you are dishonest, then you'll sit down. Joey! Joey! 1 minute. Okay, let's sit down. Do we see the dishonesty and the distortion of history of this country? Now, let me get back to your question. I'm a historian by training, by the way, and I've taught history for slightly over 20 years. Now, I have also been a journalist for nearly 35 years with different media, local and international. Now, the media has been part and parcel of transforming this country through shaping dialogue, through recording history. In fact, the media is the first primary recorder of history. Some of the things we now talk about were recorded by the media. Standard, for example, Standard newspaper was started in 1902. Nation newspaper was founded in 1960 at independence. And before that, we had other newspapers, Mwegithania, Ramogi, all the others. In fact, the nationalists that we talk about, Kenyatta, Ramogi, Achieng' Oneko, many of them were journalists because they recognized the power of the media. So as we speak about the media, intergenerational dialogue, and getting back Kenya to where it ought to be, I'm saying that the media, for example, under the Moi regime, the media and the civil society teamed up together to give voices to the minority of those people, those of us who are actually speaking a different language from what the Moi regime wanted. Because during that time, there was only the VOK, Voice of Kenya, what they now call KBC. And it was mtukufu rais amesema, that kind of thing, from morning to evening. There would be no alternative voices. Then during that period, alternative media, personally in the media sector, I don't subscribe to the claim by Kamoto of gutter press. That is not respectful. We call it alternative media because they provided alternatives to Kenyans who are speaking differently. So the media joined the civil society. I was part of that because that is when, for example, Nairobi Law Monthly by Gitobi Manyara was founded. Right now, of course, it's in the hands of other people. That was when Beyond. In fact, the reason why I was arrested, one of the reasons was, apart from being a student activist, was because I'd written an article in the then Beyond, which was critical of Okeke Amayo, who was the chairman of KANU, and how there were summoning people across the country and mistreating them in Nairobi when they came for those interviews, whether you are loyal or not. Now, the media has played an important role in shaping the dialogue in this country, and it will continue. But there are also problems within the media sector because we have issues around media ownership. Because the media, especially the legacy media, is still owned by some of the people who are actually oppressing Kenyans. And the leadership is changing. The ownership of the media sector is changing. And some of the people you accuse of oppressing us are buying different media, stations and shares and so on. By the way, I'll tell you, the Aga Khan, which owned the majority shareholding is actually divesting from there and leaving it to local players, many of them in the political class. If you checked, there was a research that we did in 2012, which says, factually true, legally untrue. Factually, who owns the media? Legally, you'll never trace it. They own them through proxies. If I were to tell you about the structure of media ownership now in this country, probably you'll not even read about some of the newspapers or listen to watch some of the TV stations. Even some of your favorite ones. Because there are proxies there. And they are managing the space in a manner, and that is why we are talking about the change in technology is important. But this change in technology, I want to warn you, because we are giving justification for many African countries and across the world. In fact, Honorable Martha, as somebody who has been in the space and Kawive, we know that across the world, most governments are getting right-wing. Most governments. We are electing right-wing governments all through. And that is why we can tolerate this one here. Our traditional supporters, democracy bastions, are no longer bothered about democracy. They are about trade, they are about security, their own interests. And therefore we are on our own. Unless we decide to shape our own conversations. The young people who are here, you have thousands of followers on your Twitter, on your technological what and so on. Before last year, what were you posting there? Nude pictures, pornography, where you went for parties and so on. Right now it has changed, and I agree. Now, that is your media. Put some conversation that is more useful to help this country. I mean, it's true. Before last year, yeah, a number of people, if we are to be honest, right now it has changed. The content is much more, progressive. So I want to say that the media will continue shaping this country. But the media has challenges that we may need to recognize. And that is why I'm urging you that we need to create alternative media spaces through technology, but in a much more in a much more, you probably need to understand, as we speak now, you asked about, we have around 22 African countries that have laws that potentially can shut down the internet. And they'll be shutting them down one by one, and they are learning from one another. Our own neighborhood here. We are learning from that. So unless we use also that space in a much more progressive way, will give reason for autocratic governments to mobilize public opinion to pass laws that will undermine our own freedoms. Because now, why do we think we have sufficient outrage against the cyber security laws and some of the ones that were signed recently? We don't. Why? And the government and others will mobilize public opinion and say, look, they have been misusing this, doing that. I mean, one of the digital platforms, and I quarrel with some of our colleagues, because one of the things that we are actually using AI and the others, we are creating fake news, misinformation, and so on, and justifying. It was fake news, misinformation, and so on that led to the death of Ojwang in the digital platforms, because the people who created that kind of campaign, you create it with a good intention, but you don't know what it can spiral to. So I want to make this conclusion by saying, one, we must be honest about this country's conversation. We must be honest about the need for intergenerational dialogue so that it is not adversarial. If it is adversarial, you will lose allies. You will lose allies. And when you are on your own, even as young people, you'll be more vulnerable. But the media build allies even with the legacy media despite the challenges. But I want to challenge you, the young people, because of technology. Please populate your media spaces in terms of those technological spaces with much more progressive thoughts than we currently see. We have a future for this country, but this country, Kenya isn't a nation. Kenya is a nation in the making. Unlike Yugoslavia, it can collapse. It can.
Thanks, Olo. And you've raised many important points that we want to flesh out a little bit more. But you mentioned something very interesting, and that's the distortion of history. One main challenge I find in a lot of young people, as I said earlier, is we don't quite understand the history of this country enough. We know the broad issues, but we don't know enough. And one distortion, and I'm going to ask Zahid to answer this question, one distortion is the role that minority Kenyans have played, both in the struggle for independence, in keeping our democracy, and in the current movement. We know this famous meme that came during the Gen Z protests. It said, the things are so bad, even the Wahindis showed up. And yes, we laughed. We laughed because it seemed funny. But for those of us who are older, we said, we've always shown up. So what is it? Why is it is not known? And why is it that what it is we can do to make sure that we are equally important in this movement, especially for the young ones?
Thanks, Abdul. Before I dive into the thing of the history of minorities as a whole, I'd just like to have some points of intervention in terms of our definitions of what we've been talking. We talk about demonizing intergenerational dialogue. What we are talking about is an intergenerational dialogue with the progressive forces of this country. We are not talking of dialoguing with Kenyatta, with Moi, with the Kibakis, and the other ruling classes that have dominated this country. We will have intergenerational dialogues with the progressive coalitions that Honorable Mata Karua represents, and other people who stand for a progressive, united, democratic, non-tribal and non-sectarian Kenyans. That's the intergenerational dialogue that we want to have. So let's be very careful about writing off people across the board. That's not good enough. Just a couple of other things in terms of that we keep aspiring to say that, we could have been another Singapore. Really? I mean, Singapore's human rights status is horrible. We get bombarded by CNN and all these things. If people were to watch what happens in Asia, you'd be stunned at how many violations are, and you would turn back. But having said that, we had a great economy. We had the Kenya bus service, we had the East African community, we had a health service, we had a transport service, we had everything. What happened? This traitor intergenerational class destroyed, tribalized, and alienated us from the truth of what was going on. So I would really say that we have a duty to those ideals of developing a healthcare, a housing, a regional unity that existed in the 60s and 70s. Yes, things have changed. We don't have the Nyerere of those eras. We got other people in power, but it is possible for us to go back to those days. I personally come from the underground struggle against Moi in the 80s, and there's only one thing that is true, is that this is a long-term struggle. It's not going to happen in 2 years, 3 years. Yes, we hope that the next election, for whatever it's worth, will bring change. I'm not quite sure what will that translate into, if what people on these panels have said, just in terms of young people participating. And I think that the question is not only participating and voting, but how are you going to protect your vote? We've had elections stolen in this country. I mean, there's the 2002 proverbial election, but after that, every election has been stolen despite massive turnouts. So how are you going to, it's not the fact that you vote, it's how are you going to protect your vote? I stood up against Uhuru Kenyatta's coronation, and that's what I call it, in 2013. We had a massive vote. We knew who won the vote, but we know what actually happened. And we got this deep state and other people who have manipulated and stolen our vote. So do ask yourself the questions that beyond registering, how are you going to get involved in civic spaces to protect the vote? Where are you going to intervene? Which organizations and movements are you going to be part of? Or are you going to vote and then stand at the ballot at the ballot post and make sure that your vote is counted and it doesn't go into dustbins also, or other votes are being substituted. I think to have a larger view of where we are, somebody talked about the move towards right-wing movement. We've seen the whole right-wing all over the country. Rutos is one of them, but we've seen the States, we've seen the UK, we've seen India, we've seen all this right-wing Brazil. I mean, that has changed. It's happened in Argentina. How many of the youth understand the global impact of imperialism and the way right-wing forces, through very often right-wing church organizations, manipulate and ask people to vote in a certain way? What are you voting for? How many of you have got involved in the Palestinian movement and supported the struggle and the shout against the genocide? I think that's very, very important. If you don't have a larger global view of what is happening and who are we being affected by, then I think it'll be difficult to imagine where we are going. In terms of where I come from, it is very true that I come from a community that considers its life to be within the 2x2 or 5x5 meter they live in Westlands and everywhere else. They're a community unto themselves. They're a large business community, but they don't get involved in struggles. And I think that is saying that even in history, we've had Bilder Kagia, we've had Kimathi, we've had Achen Oneko, we've had other people who have got involved. And then there's a large part of the African community that have worked with the traitor class in this country and made us where we are today. So I think we do need to think about those progressive forces that have formed Kenya today. But everybody is now heard. When there was a Gen Z protest, we heard people asking, so who was Pinto? How many of you people know who is Pinto? How many? Right, okay, that's great. Pinto was assassinated in 1965 for having stood up to the traitor Kenyatta class. Then there was the person who formed the trade union movement in this country called Makan Singh. He was then detained by the colonialists. The traitor class led by Tomboya has made the working class and the unions today what they are. Atwoli is a representation of the neo-colonial state in Kenya that has captured and oppressed and stolen the wealth of the Kenyan workers. So there's a lot of class solidarity across the races. And I think that's what I need to say, that really we all need to hold hands and we need to work across and support the progressive forces. It is very important that this is not a race issue. It is not a tribal issue. It's a class issue. At the end of the day, no matter what you say, you see the ruling class get together, and dine in the evenings and then, work out how best to vote and make this country theirs. So I think it's important to have the class element. In the present era, we must not forget people like Davinda Lamba, who led the Operation Firimbi movement, that together with Wangari Maathai was instrumental in publicizing and saving Karura Forest, which again we know is up for grabs even today. There was Arena Patel, who stood up and saved Jivanji Gardens. She gave her whole life to this struggle, and she again differentiated herself of being a progressive revolutionary force against a class and a group of people that basically have sold this country. There was Firoz Navroji, whom we've lost. He was the articulate statesman, legal person who we saw on our TVs in almost every election petition we've had for the last, four or five elections. And he stood out and made his voice very clear. He stood with the Kenyan people. And then, of course, we can't forget the person who was instrumental in helping us formulate our 2010 election. That's Yash Gai. Yash Gai, I think we owe a round of applause to him because he gave us something. Yeah? Today, he's ailing health-wise and things. But I mean, it's those groups of people I think that we need to sort of learn from. Those are the intergenerational struggles that we need to actually work with. It's nothing to demonize. It's for us as Kenyans first. And I keep being told by people, who are you? I said, look, I'm just a Kenyan. I'm sad to say, but there are people within my community who have called themselves Tribe 44. I mean, what the hell is Tribe 44? Tribes have destroyed our country, used in a negative ethnic connotation. So I think let us support and when what Abdul says in terms of the young South Asian youth who are on the streets. We met some of them about 6 months ago to ask them, where are you going? And it was like, I think even within the larger Gen Z movement, people have withdrawn to say, what do we do next? Yes, there's been violence. Yes, there have been killings. Yes, there have been intimidation. But then if we got scared by that, then Honorable Mata Karu and everybody else would not be sitting here, because they have endured 40 years since 1979, 1978. I remember those struggles. Gitobu Imanyara, all those people who stood up, for the rights of these people. They have hung in there. That's the generation we need to dialogue with, not ostracize, not put aside and say that you are traitors. Right now we've got a dictatorship, and the only way we are going to win this thing is to have a broad coalition of progressive forces. That means youth. That means women. That means minorities from wherever you come in. We've got a moment in history where if we don't watch out, we were in for another. We've got 8 bills that have been signed. It's just the beginning, and we've seen worse than that. We are in for another 5 years after 2027 of pure repression. How many of you are going to stand up and say no? Thank you.
Thanks, Zahid. And that leads to my next question to both Albert and Joshua. You've mentioned, and even Olo mentioned, that many countries are going right-wing, and that's true. Many progressive democracies in North America, in Europe, are going right-wing. And one reason is because politicians are able to have this politics of fear. They talk to their constituencies and make them fear what they don't know, to fear the other. Now, we are not strangers to that, because at every election cycle, we become tribal, and that's the truth. For those of us who lived through the PEV, it was the most disappointing time in which educated Kenyans who you would think are center-left and progressive suddenly remembered what tribe they were. So my questions to Joshua and Albert is, one thing we saw in the Gen Z movement is young Kenyans saying, we don't want that anymore. We are tribeless. And that's good. But how do we protect that so that come 2027, we don't see what we've always seen in every election year, that suddenly we remember who we are, and suddenly someone cannot be president or someone cannot be a leader because of their tribe or their gender or any other thing? How do we protect what you achieved in the Gen Z movement?
Thank you, and I'll be very brief. We have to sustain the momentum of the movement. And we can only sustain the momentum of the movement by organizing. And part of organizing is what we are doing here. Because in this forum, different youth groups, different groups of young people have met. This is where to network and create solidarity together, so that next time we have another action or next time we have something to be done, then we all have a web, a larger web, so that we can always organize. So we must organize and maintain the message. We must maintain our ideals of tribelessness. So in that organizing, because as Senior here has said, it's like some young people have withdrawn. People have withdrawn and they're like, now where do we go from here? How do we move to the next step? But we've also had efforts by different disintegrated groups of people trying to organize from their various communities and from their various groups. But there's been lacking, something has been lacking. There's a knob that we just need to tweak to be able to find a way to bring all these together, because there are quite a number of efforts from every part of this country. But there's been a challenge in helping rebuild what was built last year and part of this year to come back now to organizing, because we said we are moving from, and I don't believe we are moving from action or rather street action to dialogue or to discussion. We have to maintain both, because a time is coming when even the conversation we are now setting up to will not even work, and we will need to still get back to street action. We can never forget that. So we have to remember that there was the ideals that we've had, and that to sustain that ideals in our large numbers that we had, quote unquote, we must organize now. And even as we move forward, there's need to prioritize progressive forces. Because legacy politicians do is they observe everything and they realize the young people have come together, and now the nation is saying we are leaderless and we are tribeless. They resort back to their tribes. And they go back to, in my area right now, we have very MPs we've considered knowledgeable who are going back home and telling people, you must first remember you are a Luo. And we have been sidelined from government for the longest time. It's the first time our son is in charge of money in Kenya. In fact, they are saying that mkoba wa pesa ya Kenya inalala Homa Bay. Now and there's someone, I don't know whether you're saying correct, that is the case or what is correct. It's unfortunate that I know you. Alam. And others are saying we have been sidelined. Actually, and that cabinet secretary is very proud that he is the first Luo to hold that position. I wonder what's in that. I mean, what is about that? And then others are saying, for the first time, stima inatoka Siaya, ikienda the rest of the country. That is what they are telling. It's not a laughing matter. That is what they're telling people in the villages. And they're believing. And they are our shoshos and mothers who believe that all money in Kenya is stored in Homa Bay, where this cabinet secretary comes from. And they believe there is money there. Because they're speaking to them in their language. I think it was Nelson Mandela that said, if you want to speak to the mind of a man, speak to them in a language they understand. But if you want to speak to their heart, speak in their language. So they are speaking in their language. Wanajua, if we start explaining, very complicated terms, they will not understand. Wanasema tu mama, ile pesa yote mnatoa iko Homa Bay. Wanasema mama, pesa ni temi choko Kenya ka. Nindo Homa Bay. Sitima tema tiyo Kenya ka. Nikanye Siaya. From Ugunja. Yes. Stimi tudo from Ugunja. Wanasema asubuhi before uamke, electricity is being connected from Ugunja in Siaya. So all Kenyans from Mombasa, Turkana, everywhere, they depend on Siaya for electricity. And people are celebrating, they're saying, by the way, this is a good thing, it's good to be in government. And our mothers are celebrating and ululating and saying, "Alili, for the first time we are in government." And trust you me, those are the majority. Those of us who have this knowledge are a few of us here. The majority understand that man is now sleeping in Homa Bay. So we must ensure that we work so hard for the Kenya we want. You see, the problem again is many of us are not willing to put in the work. Politicians are putting in the work. And Honorable Martha, I think, understands this. By the way, I normally wonder how you do these things. You see Martha in the morning in a press conference, in the afternoon ako wapi, kidogo ameshikwa Tanzania, kidogo ako court Uganda with Besije, Comrade Besije, and now you wonder. That is the hard work we are talking about. We could see this tyrant William Ruto campaigning in 5 counties in a day. Or even more, 5 counties in a day. And is able to maintain that momentum for 3 good months. But for us, we are not willing to put in the work. We are not willing to put in the work. So we must work hard for the Kenya we want. We must also get down to the language of the common mwananchi and tell them, huyo mtu analipwa this amount of money in a month, but it's feeding him and his family. None of that money is coming to you. We must tell them that. And even those, my problem even those who do not have electricity in their homes are celebrating that electricity is manufactured in Siaya. And so wanasema tunainusia, wanasema nini stima noto ngwea. That means hiyo stima hata kama tunainusia lakini bado itatoka kwetu. So tunafurahia. So we have to get serious. We must organize. We must bring all progressive forces together. And I hope the political class are listening here. Sungwoyo, Martha Karua, you guys are listening. It is time that we bring the progressive forces together and tell them what to do as the people. Because I believe that leaders should listen to the voices of the people. Leaders are not the sole decision makers and how they should create. Because if us, the progressive forces, the Wananchi, decide that this is what we want to do, we just need to advise these people and tell them, look, this is the direction we want to move. And for us to move, you guys must come together and we must move like this. That is how we will kill this thing of going back to the villages and talking to them in their languages. Asante.
Thanks. We are running short of time. I'm going to give Albert the mic to give his contribution in 1 minute, and then I'll ask the last question for every panelist to also contribute in 1 minute and hand over the mic to Honorable Martha. So do we give you the mic now then? So you can give us your remarks.
May I begin by apologizing for being disruptive, but I need to leave to another venue to do what Okeo said I do. Divide the day into segments. I just wanted to respond to very little, and I've marked the things. One, just to say that reactions against women, that's was contributed by the sole female panelists there. Reactions against women by the system are always more vicious. It's like you have crossed a line. It was the same for me, for them in the 90s. It is now happening in the year 2020 something. So for the women, I wanted to say, try not to be alone and fear darkness. Clear off and go where you are going, because there will be special punishment for you. And we have seen it in the whatever. Even the decapitated bodies of women, I don't believe about that guy and 42 people. There's a bigger story than that. And it's a reaction to the appearance of women in the demos. Number two, and that we need to storify the contributions of women, of people who have been ignored, the contribution of Asians, right from the freedom struggle, not just as lawyers, but also as part of the movement. So we need to contribute, do that history, because nobody else will. Number two is about the generational gap, and it's already been captured. This is a conversation like you do in your home. There is no country for the young and a country for the old. We are a family. In the family business, you do not overthrow your parents. But when you show initiative, some of them leave the stage and leave it to you. In politics, it doesn't happen that way. You grab. I was barely 35 when I grabbed from a man of 80. So I invite you to come and grab from me. Lakini ukingojea nikupe utakaka. Utakaka. So just come on and let's be in this stage together. They are very, very great young people who have views that can help this country. They are people of all ages. So come, let's mix and let us move together. Let's not have a divide of young and old. But because necessarily the young are the majority, you will also be a majority in leadership positions. Look at parliament. Look at the county assemblies. It should be the same in cabinet positions. So come forward. Number two, complacency of the middle class. Okeo got it so well. I actually call it the missing middle, because we have people looking for seats, and then the people at the very bottom, the grassroots. Middle class feel like they're insulated because they found private solutions to public problems. You police for yourself, you do this, but you're not completely safe because you'll still be attacked. So instead of staying away from politics, thinking that it is dirty, politics affects everything you do and affects your life. Contribute to making political parties vehicles of democracy, not vehicles of elections. Come organize with the rest and let us rescue ourselves so that the systems can save us. I'm very, very glad to hear Okeo hitting that on the head. Now, Parliament, I had 4 points. The fourth point has come much later. I'm going to leave it if I can't find it. There's something you said and I got it, but it's now disappeared. So I'm going to leave it. But I wanted to say this. What is happening is too great to be left to any one person and to even be left to politicians. Let this movement be led by civil society, bringing everybody, because if you leave to the political class, we are all competitors. So we might not do it right. There will be people vying in civil society, but your sole reason is not about vying. So you're better placed to lead the movement, and that's why I'm so glad about today. Thank you very much. Allow me to leave to go to the next place. I have missed the fourth point, but when it comes, fourth, I have seen it. Parliament is a public place. Do not be told about a protected place. It's a public building. You can access it. In other countries, there is no even any fence on Parliament. It is a public place. In the US, the White House, it's a public place without a fence. And even when there is an occupant, people go to view it. There are certain sections that visitors queue to see every day. We must leave this place of owning public spaces and killing people when they go near them. Thank you.
Asante sana, Honorable Martha. So we've run short of time, but I'm going to ask each panelist in 1 minute as their closing remarks to tell us what they think is a priority for the country going forward. Please just keep 1 minute. We will discuss further in the other sessions. I'll start with you again.
Okay, fine. Thank you so much. I think mine will just to, before Honorable Martha leaves, if I can share my book with her, it's called A Comrade Forever. Emmanuel, Kenya, kindly. Okay, mine is here. Yes. Yeah, it's called A Comrade Forever. I wrote it in, it's a memoir for the journey I've worked in leadership in campus. So, fine. Yangu ni, my kicker is, let's ensure, because we have a program that we are going to start at the grassroots. In campuses at the grassroots of leadership, we find the class reps. They are very much ignored for those who have been in campus leadership. But at this moment, we are tasking them that they will also be encouraging our Gen Zs in classrooms to register as voters, as the registration of voters also goes to campuses. And before they attend some of those classes, they will have to be showing their voter ID, because at the grassroots level of young people, you find them in institutions. So a voter ID, itakuwa siri yako, na that is the only soft weapon that we're going to use in changing our democracy. Thank you.
Mine, as Martha has said, they're not going to give it to you. You have to grab it. Are you ready to grab it? Do you want to grab it? Yes. We need to see that need. We need to see that need, that hunger, that thirst, that you want to take over this country and claim it back. It's the only way that you'll be able to guarantee that you actually get to enjoy your years in this country. You have many more years than I do. I probably just have maybe 40, if I'm lucky, if I live well, to 80 or 85, but you have many more years. Please take control of this country. Make sure you get and I know I'm speaking to the converted here. I know you're working with many other young people, mashinani. Please pass the message. Ensure that they register as voters, and let them be active. Let them follow the money, because one key concern I have, one thing that keeps me awake, is that as we sleep, money is being stolen left, right, and center. This country is being sold to the lowest bidder, not the highest bidder. You've heard Martha talk about the privatization. Kenya Pipeline Company is now up, is soon going to be up for sale. KICC, all our strategic assets. So where are we going to get resources to continue running this economy? Guys, I'm Kenny. Follow that shilling to the last cent and protect your country, protect your future. Viva!
Okay. Kawive, why did you choose this venue? Yeah, they need to know. This was a citadel of the struggle. This venue. It defined a lot of the struggles that we got into. And we would have many meetings there, many meetings here, and a few other places, Ufungamana and all the others. So history is important, and that is why I'm asking him. This venue here is significant, even this, the convening. But one, this is important. The convening of this and talking about conversations to get back the soul of the nation is important. But I stressed on honesty. If we are going to get back the soul of this nation, we must be honest. We must not distort history. And then also, for the Gen Zs, I was part of the youth leadership. I was actually in charge of IEC material and so on. For the Akinananim, Tineg, I would be woken up in the night, using the old telephones and so on. I would say, youth energy crying out for space, give it. That was even before Bon Mas 1, through youth agenda. So you have space to make a contribution. But I don't buy the idea that you are going to go on leaderless. I don't buy that idea. You are not going to convince me that you can be leaderless. There was leadership. You have created some leadership, isn't it? Who was generating the posters? That was leadership. And asking the rest of the country to robotically fall in. Did you mobilize the rest of that constituency like we mobilized during NCC? I was part of the NCC. Davinda Lamba, Simba, Doga Year. That was one of our guys. We went across the country through that. Leadership must be there. The pretense about lack of leadership, you must create cells. We were part of that underground. You must create it. You don't have to come out in the open because there's a lot of surveillance, fine. But find a way of creating leadership across the country. That is what we created. across the country, cells, until we inspired people. Lina Jebik Limo was a product of that. Kalwale. Those were products of what we call the NCC movement. And there was not this technology that we have. Create leadership. Because people must relate with you through leadership. It doesn't have to be very pronounced. Okay? So I want to challenge you. This is an important conversation. We have a country to guard. We can't guard the country through reckless behavior. We can't. Okay? But it is important that we continue these conversations. Personally, I'll be available. In fact, I helped to translate I had to translate in local languages. The finance bill, I was in Arusha when some of them were asked me. But when I came back, someone said, no, you are too old, stay away. You lost me at that point.
We welcome you back, comrade. I'll finish with a quote. The arc of the moral universe is long, but ultimately it bends towards justice. But it doesn't just bend on its own. We have to bend it, all of us together, because we are pursuing a just cause, and when the cause is just, conquer we must. Asanteni. Conquer we must. Yeah?
James said that we had, 10 million or 10 millionaires and 100 million beggars or something of the sort. Today we have how many millionaires and how many beggars? Are we going to let that economic disparity continue? We need to believe in that it is getting wider and it's getting worse. And finally, organize, organize, organize. Don't agonize. You'll get stuck in it and there'll be no movement forward. Kenya NiSisi.
Viva, comrades, viva. This is the close of the conversation. In my polling station, there are 341 people registered as of 2023. Out of those 341, 186 are below 30, and the rest, myself and others. So I just challenged these people and said, just get one of you, and the 186 vote for that one person, and that person will win in that polling station. So just do the maths about it. Because unfortunately, we gave ourselves a constitution, and I'm saying unfortunately, with my tongue in my cheek, we gave ourselves a constitution which says the only way to form a government is through elections. Of course, there's Article 1 about sovereignty, which we can access directly. But the instruments in the constitution are about elections. So we have to do the maths, and Joki, I will never forgive you for failing to clinch the, what is that word called? Seat. Because she started with courage, then akafika mahali, ulipewa pesa. There's some, because we get demobilized with resources, we get demobilized by funny people, we get demobilized with the violence, we get demobilized by compromise. We must close those gaps of compromise, and we must have the courage to say we can take this country back without money, but with passion and dedication and focus. Thank you.
In fact, let's give a round of applause for all the panelists. There have been so many exciting things said. I think the conversations will go on because so much has come out that we need to flesh out even more and more. The main thing we got from this panel is what affects Kenya affects all of us. Right now we are youth-led, but we have a lot to learn from other generations. And as we say, Kenya NiSisi, it does not matter what your age is, what your gender is, what your ethnicity is, what your race is. Sote ni wa Kenya. Asanteni.